This is Grafted Together with ACSI Chief Ministry Officer Jerry Nelson.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Grafted Together podcast, where we take a deeper dive into biblical worldview and spiritual formation, and we discuss how these two things should be integrated into the everyday life of our schools. In all things, we believe that spiritual formation matters. My name is Douglas Campbell, and I'm the ministry team senior coordinator at ACSI. And I've had the opportunity over this past year to help facilitate certain discussions in the Grafted Together podcast. And so what we're doing as we move into the summer is a little bit unique and a little bit different, but it's a way to keep the content flowing so that you guys are continuing to learn and grow in the roles that God has called you in. So what we're doing this summer is we're going to have some special members of our spiritual formation core group who are going to have an individual podcast in which they share on a particular topic of interest or something that they have done at their schools. And so this is going to be a good opportunity for you to kind of get to know some of our core group members and also hear about the ways that God has equipped them and designed them and gifted them in the space that God has called them to. So I hope you enjoy these summer podcasts. They are a little bit different, but I believe they're continuing to help you grow in the role and in the spaces and places that God has called you to. So enjoy the summer, enjoy the break, and enjoy to continue to hear from our leaders in the Spiritual Formation Network. Thank you.
What's up, ACSI, spiritual directors, spiritual leaders, chaplains, pastors. I am Sam Farinacci, and I am the chaplain at Oaks Christian Online School. This is my 15th year here at the time of this recording, and I'm thrilled to be able to share with you about something that I have been wrestling with that I'm sure is coming up at your schools as well, which is how can we be a resource, a pastoral presence to our schools and our students and our families and our staff and our faculty in a time of AI. And so I am going to share some thoughts based on the Tower of Babel story. So I was reading an article called A Tower That Reaches the Heavens by Erica Katsky, and she pointed out something very small in the text, but that ended up having a very big impact on me. And so I'm thrilled to share some of my reflections upon this text with you. So the Tower of Babel story, as I'm sure that many of you are familiar with, is a story that's ultimately about language and about people coming together and being dispersed and about how God intervenes in human wills and ways. And so those are kind of the bigger parts of this story. But I want to look at one of the details that I think sometimes gets missed in our understandable and good effort to look at the big picture. Sometimes we miss this little detail. And so in this story, we may recall that the whole world, has one language and one common speech, and that as people have moved eastward, they enter into this place called Shinar, and it's kind of an empty area, and so they settle there. So this nomadic people, they're wandering about, and they find a place to land, and so they sort of set up camp there. And then they say to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be scattered over the face of the whole earth." And you may recall that then God comes down, and there's a lot of discussion among biblical scholars about what it is precisely that God is concerned about and how it is that God resolves this situation. But what I want to stress is the technological shifts that are taking place at this time. So again, this is a nomadic people that's wandering around, and they come upon this ability to use a new technology, chiefly bricks instead of stone, and tar or bitmer, more likely, instead of mortar. And we may take this lightly, who really cares? But the key detail here is that they're able to make bricks faster. They're able to increase the speed of building. And now I think we're talking about something that we can relate to. Coming upon technologies that allow us to move faster, introduce us to new questions. And that's why I think this passage is a great one to look at for exploring AI with our teams, especially as those of us who are responsible for making sure that there is always space to seek God's wisdom in the midst of these difficult decisions. A couple of things about the context of this passage. It's easy for us to forget this because we jump to chapter 11 and we just start reading in Genesis. But just before this has been the flood, where the whole world as they know it has been turned upside down. And a lot of times we use this expression to mean emotionally or metaphorically or even spiritually. And certainly those things are true in this case. But it's also accurate to say that geologically things have been turned upside down, right? Physically, their world has been uprooted, has been disoriented from the flood. And so these people are displaced. They're already nomadic, but now they're a displaced nomadic people. And so their entire landscape is now unrecognizable, and they are wandering, and they finally find kind of a place to at least settle for the moment. And suddenly, the text doesn't describe to us exactly how this took place, but the ability to build bricks appears on the scene in the human mind, right? This new way of using technology emerges, and they're able to increase the speed of building at this very moment. And I want to suggest that it is very important that we understand this text as having something to share with us about technology that emerges in response to chaotic circumstances. Again, their world has been turned upside down. They've experienced dramatic loss. And it is at this moment that they find themselves with a new technology that gives them a new idea. Notice that it is at this moment that they are able to be seduced, is the word that I'm going to actually use. So I think so often we think about new technologies, we think of it in this order. That humans are curious about something, they want to be able to do something, and so they build a new technology in order to respond to this problem that they want to solve. But in this case, it's actually the other way around. The new technology emerges, and it's from the lust or the insatiable desire to use it that they get this idea to start to build a tower outside of direction from God. So the technology in this case isn't a solution to human curiosity. The technology generates the curiosity. And generally, curiosity is something that we tend to be proud of, something that we tend to privilege, as I think we should. I think it's a God-given innate quality. But in this case, it's more like the sort of lustfulness that comes with curiosity. This, what could we do? What could we have? What could we consume? What could we possess? And so I really want us to focus on this passage as we think about our schools and our teams. And I want us to really notice, and I know I'm saying this quite a bit, but I want to belabor this point that the flood and the displacement that flood has caused has put the people of God in the perfect, sadly, position to be seduced by technology into making a poor decision. That it's not just any time that the Tower of Babel happens, but it is at this time, immediately following the flood, that this is possible. Now I want us to consider our circumstances. Now that we've seen this text, what can this text teach us about our circumstances and what's going on in us that might be shaping how we are understanding AI? So we've just been through a pandemic. You're probably tired of people talking about it. It probably feels like it's been said. We've thought about it. We've talked about it. We've discussed it. But I want to argue that in the last 10 years, this has still been such a disruption, such a catastrophic displacement for so many of us in so many small and big ways that we do need to consider that it has been like a flood. Additionally, we've all been divided politically in the United States. Again, this has become so cliche to say that I think it's lost its sting a little bit. And so to be honest, I want to re-sting us. I don't want this to be something that we've just kind of all rolled over and gotten used to. This is a flood too. This is a complete turning over of the world as we know it too. And it's at this moment, under these conditions, that a new technology appears. And this technology, even more dramatic than the Tower of Babel, is not the next one in a long iteration of construction, but is different in kind, not just degree. In other words, it's not like this is just part of the natural progression. AI is a deviation from the normal advancements of technology. Whatever we might decide about it, we can't say, oh yeah, this is totally normal. It is very bizarre, this technology. And so it's in this moment where we have just all been through a decade of flood of all kinds that this new technology is hitting us. And it's not really in response to any particular human needs per se, but is now questioning and asking us new challenges about what it might be able to do since it is already here. So as most of you listening are in positions of spiritual guidance, I want to offer you this piece of advice that is probably obvious to you, but I want it to be practical as well. And so I want us to be empowered as spiritual directors, spiritual leaders, chaplains, pastors, etc., to name this and then do it in response to our teams trying to figure out what to do about AI. We need to address the people before we address the technology. This is one of many of the issues that we see in the Tower of Babel story, is that the people have not worked through what they've just been through, and so it makes them susceptible to being deceived by this technology. It's not that the technology itself perhaps is deceptive, but that they are in a place to misuse it. And so we don't know what this new technology will bring us, but we do want to make sure that we are in the best place possible to receive it and decide what to do about it. There's a beautiful article about the book of Exodus and about the importance of memory. And again, the Exodus is this place where you see generations of people who have been through their whole world being turned upside down. They've been enslaved, even more dramatic by far than what we've been through, because it's also for many, many, many generations, right? And so this text says, among the most powerful things that dictate our current reality is our past experience, our memories. Whether we're conscious of it or not, the way we perceive and respond to the present is always filtered through and shaped by the past. And if that felt like too much to hear, here's the next part of the text that I think will be clear. We see what is through our memories of what was. Another way of understanding this is if we don't face what has been, we're not going to be in a good place to provide guidance and leadership for what is. And what is AI. So we need to get ready, get ourselves into a place where we can face these new questions of, how do we teach about AI? Do we use AI? Should we incorporate AI? I'm using AI personally. Should I also be using it professionally? Maybe the other way around. I know my team is using this professionally. I don't know whether or not to absorb it personally. There are some big questions ahead. And I know that chaplains, pastors, spiritual directors, we are often in the room when these choices are being made. And so I want you to consider this, and this is where we get very practical together. I don't think that your team, whether it's a church or your school or your organization, is ready to decide if you're going to use AI or not until the following 5 things have been done. The first one is that you actually trust each other. Not that you are nice to each other, not that you kind of get along, but that you actually trust each other. This is a sign of healing in a community. Secondly, is that you allow voices across the spectrum to speak. So if there is a spectrum of AI preference, some people are very optimistic, some people are very pessimistic, everything in between, are they talking to each other? And are they able to talk to each other? Are there platforms, scenarios for them to talk to each other? That's the second criteria. Third criteria, you pray together and you mean it. right? It's not polite prayer. It's not prayer just for prayer's sake, but you are able to pray together in a deep and profound way. And finally, last two here, you play together. This might seem counterproductive, but if it's all work and no play, then it's going to be difficult to face something as unexpected as AI. This needs to be a space, your school, your church, etc., where you enjoy each other's company. You have fun together. That's going to always ease the tensions of these difficulties. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, you aren't displaced. If you are in a place where all of the things are falling apart, if you haven't rerouted or regrounded since these traumatic things of the pandemic and political division have taken place, then you're probably not in a place to make a decision about something as big as AI. So when things feel overwhelming and you're in those meetings about AI, focus on these 5 things. Start here. And then from this place, we will hopefully be in a position to not be seduced by the technology, but instead to use it in a way that is for our good, or to avoid it for our good, or something in between, depending on the choices that your school makes.
Grafted Together is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International. Learn more about biblical worldview and spiritual formation at acsi.org/graftedtogether.